Let's look at my 2024 Storygraph wrap up, even though we're a week into the new year. Actually, we're going to start with the Goodreads. I'm just going to do everything at once. So, first off, my shortest book, A Bump and Boo Hell. This is a super short little short story that's set in the Mead Mishap series. And then my longest book, of course, was Wind and Truth. I don't think there's any surprise here. I finally have a new longest book. Normally it's Oathbringer. My average book length was almost 400 pages, and then the book I read that's been shelved the most on Goodreads is The Hunger Games. I'm not surprised. Oh, and then my least shelved is Settling Boonesboro, which is written by an author local to me about Fort Boonesboro. Like, no one else cares about this. At least, like, not on TikTok. My average rating was 4.4. I generally liked pretty much everything I read, and then the one that's rated highest is Words of Radiance. Nothing's changed here. That's what it is every year for me. And then the very first book review and first book I read last year was The Scarlet Alchemist, which I now have the sequel, and I just really need to read it. Let's move on to Storygraph. Same information here. The first book I read, The Scarlet Alchemist. I read 264 books, and I was so close to hitting 100,000 pages. I just really dropped off those last few days because I was sick. The last book I logged for the year was Six of Crows, which I read with my book club, and it was a reread for me. Here's kind of my mood map. So the beginning of my year, I was more light and fluffy, and then I got darker as the year went on. Makes sense to me. And then I just thought this was interesting. You set off on thrilling quests, traversed landscapes of the heart, and explored the shadows of the human psyche. I read a lot of fantasy books. That's what that means. And then I feel like that's just saying I read things at a medium pace. And then you can kind of see my up and down here. As you can see there in July, I read a fuck ton of books. And you can tell that I was sick in June. These were my top genres, fantasy and romance. That makes sense. Lots of gay books. Science fiction's up there. YA. I hate that it calls YA a genre, though, because, like, those YA books, they were all fantasy or sci-fi. I hate that. This is just stating my longest and shortest book. Same as Goodreads. My average time spent reading was around 5 days. The book I spent the least amount of time was Scott Pilgrim, which I read every single one of these in a single day, like one book per day. So, like, yes, it was volume 1, but it was also the entire series. I read one a day for a week. And then the book I took the longest last year to read was Arcanum Unbounded. I spent 29 days reading this, and that's because actually I was breaking this up so that I was reading everything in publication order. I wasn't reading this one all at once, so it took me almost a month to get through all of it. These are the authors I spent the most time with. I don't think anyone's surprised that number 1 is Brandon Sanderson. Then I read a lot of Catherine Ann Kingsley books this year because I reread all of Harrow Fair. Along with reading her Unseelie Prince series. And then after that was CM Discosta, because I got real into Cambric Creek this year. Real into it. I need that next Cambric Creek book. Please and thank you. I think it's really funny because if you look just like at my whole year and you look at the most read authors, they're mostly romance authors because you can read a lot of those really fast. And then Brandon Sanderson at the top. I think this is interesting. And Goodreads said that my average rating was 4.4. This one says it's 4.36. It's slightly lower. I think this just has like it's just giving me an extra number in there. That's why it's slightly different, but roughly the same. I liked what I read this year. I'm very good at picking out books I think I'm going to like. And here you can see my ratings. Those 2 no rating ones is from the St. Martin's Press boycotts. And I'll tell you right now that both of those were 4 stars. So even kicks it up just a little bit higher. But yeah, I liked what I read this year. I had a great reading year. I like this little information. The December, I had the most books I liked. Unsurprising to me, I was reading banger after banger in December. I rated all of them 4 and 5 stars. And then November, I had the lowest average rating, but it's still a 4.1. And then the most pages I read in one month was in July. I reread all of Murderbot that month, and I was just doing great. I didn't have craft shows going on. I had a lot more free time in July. All I was doing was going to the Renaissance Fair. July was fantastic for reading. So yeah, that is just an overlook at my year last year. Next thing I'm going to film is I'm going to go through each month and say what my favorite and least favorite thing I read was. So yeah, Sorry I'm doing this so late in the year, but I read up until the very last day. I refuse to do these wrap ups sooner than New Year's Day.